The BYU football program may be enjoying some R&R this weekend as the rest of their bye week plays out, but their thoughts and their preparation are not very far from their opportunity to make their next statement a week from Saturday when they take on East Carolina.
You are Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast on the BYU Cougars, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up, everybody? Welcome into Locked On Cougars, your daily podcast focused on the BYU Cougars. I'm Jake Hatch, executive producer of the KSL Sports Zone in Salt Lake City, Utah, and a 14-year credentialed media member at BYU. I am your resident expert and insider, your host here on this podcast. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. All right, coming up on today's show, talking a little bit of an early look at what to expect from East Carolina a week from Saturday when BYU's back in action as they go through the rest of their bye week. We'll also answer some questions about how BYU football looks at this juncture early on in the season. We're also going to catch up on BYU basketball, some news and notes trickling in. A big opportunity on national television in Big 12 play. BYU knows where they're playing their MTE next year. An offer went out to a BYU basketball player locally. Got some hoops news to catch up on. We'll do that, and then we'll finish up today's show with Big 12 big picks, making my picks for the weekend ahead in college football. And it's all brought to you today by our friends over at FanDuel. Right now, new customers can bet just $5, and if it wins, $300 in bonus bets is yours for the use across their platforms. Go to FanDuel.com or download their app today to get started. All right, let's dive right in on today's show. And I threw it out to our Locked On Cougars Insider group and said, hey, what questions do you guys have for a mailbag this week? And I would venture to say upwards of half of the responses to that question were related to East Carolina. I think a lot of Cougar fans are antsy, even though it's a week plus out. We're talking Thursday. BYU doesn't play until a week from Saturday, so it's almost 10 days out. But the thing about this is there's a lot of Cougar fans out there who are excited to watch this BYU team continue to progress. And I think the biggest thing is they're looking forward to is the next step or steps that Bear Bachmeier is going to take as BYU starting quarterback. I'm going to start off here with Preston's question. It says, Jake, what do you think the BYU's biggest 3 do's and 3 biggest don'ts are for ECU? Now, he has a very good question there. The do's is make sure that Bear Bachmeier is protected a whole lot better than he was against Stanford. I'm speaking of in terms of pass pro and making sure he's not taking the hits, some of the licks he took against Stanford. You don't mind if he's delivering hits because I use the analogy all the time. You want to be the hammer, not the nail. Well, some of the hits he took against Stanford, he was the nail in that circumstance. You got to avoid that. Number 2, BYU's rushing attack, it's got to be where it's been so far this season. That means it's downright elite. It's absolutely taken the pressure off of Bear Bachmeier, and all the same, making BYU's play action passing game, which is his absolute major strength right now, making it as dangerous as possible. And then the other do, the biggest do, I guess, of the bunch, if the do, okay, not Mountain Dew, but nonetheless, the point remains that the one thing they need to do most of all is make sure that they contain a pretty prolific passing attack for Eastern Carolina. Hauser, I think I got his first name right. If I didn't, I apologize. He has been absolutely slinging it all over the yard so far this year, former 4-star prospect, transfer from Michigan State. They don't have much of a run game to speak of so far this year, but the passing game, it looks downright dangerous, and BYU's got to be ready for that. Now, the three biggest don'ts. Don't turn the ball over. Don't get caught up in the travel across the country. Don't let it get in your head. And the other don't, do not let this crowd get in your head and allow it to affect your play on the field. And that goes mostly, I think, for a young player or young players like a Bear Bachmeier. It's his first road start. He's got to kind of tune all that out, focus on what he can control. The controllable line gets thrown around all the time. But in this circumstance, he's got to focus on that. It's his first career road start in the Dowdy-Ficklin Stadium down there in Greenville. It's going to be hopping, and they don't see programs like BYU come in there all the time, and you can guarantee their fan base is going to be looking forward to seeing if BYU is going to fall for a third straight time to their beloved Pirates. So those are the do's and don'ts from my end, Preston, about ECU. Now, other questions about this is related to the Eastern Carolina side of things. Is Braden asked this: what kinds of offensive plays is Eastern Carolina most vulnerable to? Anything that you have opened up the playbook a little bit more? And do you think that that game next week, BYU will have a ground and pound, maintain possession game like Army versus Kansas State, given the state of ECU's passing attack? Now, here's the thing about this. knowing BYU's style, I don't think they're going to go into that game saying, guys, we're going to hold the ball for 40 plus minutes. We're going to have about 3 possessions each half, and we're just going to get out of there. That's not BYU's mentality. If it requires them holding the ball in the second half to make sure that they hold on to a win, sure, you do that, but you don't go in there having that game plan. BYU's whole offense is attack-oriented, and I respect it wholeheartedly. They're not going to sit back and absorb, to use the soccer term, and then strike out on the counter, even though football and football are very different, but you get the point of what I'm trying to make here. BYU wants to be on the front foot. They want to be the team that is pushing the tempo in this game, and they'll do just that. But if it comes to it, late in the game, they're nursing a lead. Guess what? The best thing you can do to have in your back pocket is have a sledgehammer like LJ Martin and I don't know what you call Sione Moa. Is he like the smaller sledgehammer? Have those two just barreling down on ECU's defense, softening them up, and in the back half of the game, making it as simple as possible for your team to win the game. So, yeah, I could see that maybe in the second half, you go to more of a ground and pound style, but you don't go in there with that mentality. Other questions here about ECU. Michael, when do you realistically think that A-Rod will let Bear really start throwing the football? Well, we've seen him throw it on the field a little bit. We saw it against Stanford. I think you'll see more of it against Eastern Carolina, but you want to know when it really gets unleashed? Utah. I know that sounds crazy to say, but here's the thing. BYU, in theory, now Colorado and Arizona have proven to be pretty frisky so far. West Virginia just lost their best running back and a really, really good wide receiver, so they look like they're going to be a little bit down when they come to Provo. But really, I think you want to have a guy like Bear Bachmeier at the peak of his powers, to use that expression, when Utah comes to town October 18th. The rest of these other games, yes, you want to win all the Big 12 games you possibly can. You have 3 of them before Utah. You're going to unleash more of that offense, the most you've unleashed of it against those opponents. But you want to talk about the wide open playbook? I think by the time you get to game 7 in Utah, that is when it gets flung open. And to answer your question, Michael, that's when I think you start to see Bear fully unleashed. Other questions here. How different do you think the offense would look with Hillstead at QB1? This comes from Eric. Some of his complaints about Bear, but I'm not convinced that we look any different than with Hillstead or Bourget. Plus, it's crazy to complain when BYU's outscoring their opponents by a healthy margin of 46.5 points per game. I don't think it would look much different, but at the same time, the level of competition has been downright bad. No offense to Stanford or Portland State, but those are the 2 weakest opponents on BYU's schedule. Unless something absolutely crazy happens against the other Big 12 teams, I just don't see anybody being as bad as those 2, including Eastern Carolina. I say East Carolina before I have Pirates fans jumping down my throat. But I do think that you are in a good spot, speaking of BYU, with Bear Bachmeier, and I'm excited to see what the future holds for him. And the final question about ECU, and we'll get to the rest of these questions as today's show progresses, it comes from Jeff. What does BYU need to do to stop ECU's passing attack? Well, number 1, generate pressure with 3- and 4-man fronts. You have to make Kattenhauser feel uncomfortable in the pocket. If you can't generate pressure, guess what? It's going to be a long day because he'll sit back there and pick you apart. He's that good of a quarterback. The wide receivers are good enough, and they've got a very potent passing game. The other thing is you have to make sure that your corners do not fall for the bait. What I mean by that is double moves, sluggos, out and ups, all the different things that teams will try to do with a pump fake and then go over the top on you. It's also going to require guys like a Tanner Wall as BYU's free safety. He is that last line of defense. He's got to be on point. His eyes have got to be true, and he's got to make sure that he knows where he needs to be and get there when he needs to be there and clean up a mess. There's going to be messes. I use the term mess all the time, but that's exactly what it is. When a guy gets open deep, guess what? That corners have to play catch up, but the free safety, their job is a single high. They've got to make sure they go over there and make the tackle at all possible and minimize the damage for the defense for BYU. So that's how you contain it, it feels like. But the pressure part of it, you've got to get after that quarterback and do it, hopefully, with 3- and 4-man fronts. If you're ever having to force 5- and 6-man blitzes to get after the quarterback, that's also a recipe for disaster because you're leaving guys open that Kattenhauser can find right out the chute. All right, coming up next, we're going to talk about BYU basketball. Some news out there with regards to offers for BYU in terms of a local player. We know that they're going to be playing on Big Monday. It's been a minute since BYU's been on ESPN on a Monday night. We know they're going to do that during the Big 12 portion of their schedule upcoming. And we also learned Well, they will be playing their MTE in 2026. Yeah, you can plan on it right now, make your plans, and we'll get to all that news and notes around BYU basketball and do it next as we roll on right here on Locked On Cougars. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at DoorDash. It's almost the weekend. It's time to look back and crown this week's MVP on Who Delivered, powered by DoorDash. Just like you can win every Saturday with DoorDash Streaks, saving you every time that you order. These players deliver when it mattered most. Let's break it down. For the BYU Cougars this week, it's L.J. Martin, who delivered in a big way. He obviously has been a dynamite the first two games of this season. He's got back-to-back 100-yard games. He's only had two other 100-yard plus performances in his time at BYU to date, and this is his third year. So he's absolutely off to a great start. And when the pressure was on, he has come through, no hesitation, no delay. And if you've been watching week after week, the performance is not a fluke. LJ is that player. He is on a streak. And just like LJ delivered for BYU, DoorDash delivers on your Saturdays. With DoorDash Streaks, you can save on every Saturday that you order. Stack it up all season long. Save up to $250, including $100 in DoorDash credits. The best part is you can order this Saturday, keep the streak alive, and fuel your game day only with DoorDash. Terms apply, and the promo period runs through November 18th. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Hope you're doing fantastic here on this Thursday. Little programming note for you guys coming up. I am not going to be doing a show tomorrow. So understand that if it's not in your podcast feed, it's not because I forgot to do it. It's because I'm not doing it. I am actually headed to California. I'm taking my daughter on a quick trip down to Disneyland. That's what she wanted to do for her birthday. So yours truly is making the trek to the happiest place on earth. I'm looking forward to it. Understand that we will not have a Friday podcast. BYU players are off for the weekend. I'm going to take a day and enjoy my weekend as well, and hope you guys understand. But nonetheless, let's talk some BYU basketball. Now, it feels weird to talk about this in the midst of BYU football season, especially when BYU basketball doesn't tip things off until early November. But there's been some news out there on the BYU basketball front. Let's start off with an offer locally that came up last night. Will Openshaw from Timpview High School announced he had received an offer from BYU. And the thing about Will Openshaw is that his teammate, Dean Ruckert, just recently committed to the BYU basketball program. And Dean, he's a top 100 recruit, obviously the cream of the crop when it comes to the local talent in Utah Valley. But Will Openshaw, I think this is a very, very savvy offer from Kevin Young and company. He's got length, he's got shooting ability, and the biggest thing I like about him, he's listed as either 6'9" or 6'10". We know that Kevin Young values length and athleticism on the wing, and it sure looks like Will Openshaw very well might be that. Now, he is more of a forward who can kind of slot inside and play, but he's also shown some ability to step out to the perimeter and shoot as well. So I'm interested to see what BYU's plans for him, if he does indeed commit to BYU, is. Is he going to become a true five-man for BYU in their program? Will he be a stretch four? I'm very curious to see how it all plays out for him, but very savvy offer once again by Kevin Young. And I've had some people, and we've talked about it on radio at the KSL Sports Zone with DJ and PK, as well as I've talked about it on this show. There's always kind of been a question about, is BYU going to always look nationally for guys in their recruiting classes with Kevin Young at the helm of their basketball program? Well, they're absolutely going to scour the nation. They're going to bring in the best talent that they possibly can. But that doesn't mean that Kevin is going to straight up ignore local talent. And they believe that Will Openshaw has the talent capable of contributing, or else they wouldn't offer him. That's just the simple fact of life, is Kevin Young's not out here to waste anybody's time, especially with local prospects, yank their chain and make them feel, hey, we want you. And then, oh, by the way, we filled our roster out where we don't have spots for you. That's just not his style. He absolutely wants the best talent possible. And I think I'm very intrigued to see what Will Openshaw ends up looking like for BYU if he does pick the Cougars. But I thought it was a pretty cool offer for him to get that. Now, BYU, they're also going to be on national television a lot this season. I think we all expect that with some of the non-conference matchups they've scheduled. Obviously, going to TD Garden to face off against UConn. Playing in Las Vegas to open the season against Villanova. But the big Monday thing is, it's like a hearkening back to an era past. Many of you might recall, if you're of a certain age, when BYU used to play in the Mountain West era on Big Mondays. Now, those were really late night games because weren't they like 10 p.m. Mountain Time? They're like midnight Eastern games on the ESPN networks, and it was a late night at the Marriott Center back in those days. This era of basketball, it's not that late. It's actually a 7 o'clock tip. They'll be facing off against Arizona in January. I love Big Monday. It obviously gets a lot of attention from hoop heads out there, and it's just another way for BYU to be featured on national television. So cool to see BYU getting one of those 6 spots that the Big 12 announced on a Big Monday matchup, and shows that BYU, they're going to be in the national spotlight a lot this season, and for good reason. I'm not saying it's a bad thing because they absolutely are deserving of it. But it's something to pay attention to because I do think that it's going to be curious to see how BYU performs with this extra spotlight on them, because they have absolutely been a team that's been talked about a lot this offseason. I'll just put it this way. I was talking with somebody at the BYU football game this past Saturday, and they were marveling at how much attention BYU basketball has garnered. But it doesn't mean it's a bad thing. It absolutely shows that they have got a lot of clout nationally, and that's a really cool thing for them to have because, quite frankly, what else do you expect with what Kevin Young's accomplished? Now, also, BYU, we know in 2026 is going to be headed back to the islands. They're going to be participating in the Southwest Maui Classic. Now, it's one of the premier MTEs, or they call multi-team events, that you're able to schedule one of them as a basketball program in Division I basketball. And it has some of the best teams annually playing in it. And it's always cool to see BYU be able to go over to Maui and play in this event. They've been over there a handful of times in their history, and it's been a mixed bag of success. But I think with the talent level that BYU will carry, even this will be the post AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders era for BYU basketball, because they'll graduate this season. We're talking all the way in next November. Over a year from now is when BYU will play in that MTE, but it'll be the post AJ DeBonsa and Richie Saunders era. And I still believe BYU's talent base will be as high as it's ever been when they've participated in this tournament in the past. They have been absolutely recruiting at an extremely high level. And I think Kevin Young has them capable of going there and absolutely showing out on a national level. And we'll see how it all shakes out. And then the final note I got for you guys is this popped up the other day. I actually got a note sent to me and said, hey, have you seen this? And I hadn't seen it, so I'm going to throw it up here so you guys can see it as well. I'm going to share the screen. But Chamberlain Burgess is back from his mission. And I don't know the whole details of why he's home off of an LDS mission. But as you probably can see here, if you're watching this on YouTube, it's not playing for BYU this season. He is currently enrolled. I've confirmed this, that he is enrolled at Snow College to play for the Snow College Badgers down in Ephraim, Utah. Now, Andrew May, a former BYU staffer himself, has built Snow in very short order into a national powerhouse. They had a long stretch last season where they were ranked the #1 junior college program in all of America. They fell a little bit short in the national tournament out in Hutchinson, Kansas. But Andrew's built a powerhouse with the Snow Badgers. And getting a guy like Chamberlain Burgess, who was a 4-star prospect, a guy that BYU was excited to have in their recruiting profile from this past recruiting cycle, and getting him to Snow where he can develop under Andrew May's tutelage, I think is a smart move. I don't know what the future holds for Chamberlain. Does that mean he's going to end up at BYU next year when the turnover with the roster of AJ and guys like Richie Saunders, does he end up going right back to BYU after next year? TBD. I think it all depends on how he plays now for Snow College. But I can assure you, knowing what I know of Coach May down there at Snow College, he will be in very, very capable and very good hands. And they'll make sure that he is coached up to the absolute best of his ability, because this is a kid that at Orem High School had some really high moments, and the potential there is really, really special. I probably is the term to use. BYU is excited to have him come home off of a mission and see how he develops, but that is now, because he is returned home early from his mission, and we'll see where it ultimately shakes out for him. But I think it's a really neat opportunity for him to go down to Ephraim, develop his game under a guy who understands what BYU is all about. If there is one guy coaching in the state of Utah that has ties to BYU, that understands what Kevin Young's doing, it's a guy like Andrew May, because Andrew has done a really, as I said, an impressive job about making Snow a destination. And they got a really talented roster once again at Snow College, and Chamberlain adds right to that. So I'm excited to see how he develops and what the timeline is. Does he end up spending 2 years down there before enrolling at BYU, or does he decide to opt to go elsewhere? That's all back on the table now, because once you go to a junior college, you're essentially released from the national letter of intent you signed with the program you signed. And Also, I should have added this earlier. You're probably thinking, why isn't he just at BYU? BYU filled out the roster, and I don't think they anticipated him coming home early off of his mission. And it's just it happens. It's a numbers game, and he's going to go to Snow. He develops his game, and maybe as soon as next year, we're talking about him being a member of the BYU basketball program, albeit with a junior college season under his belt, where I think that development would serve him very, very well. All right, coming up next, we will finish up today's show with the other questions I need to get to, and also it's time for Big 12 big picks for this week. My picks across the Big 12 conference and some national games as well. A big weekend, by the way, a lot of high-profile games, and we'll delve into those coming up next as we roll on right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast. Today's show is brought to you by our friends over at Mazda. Mazda craft cars for those who want to do more than simply move. Deliver confidence with every ride with more IIHS Top Safety Pick Plus awards than anybody else as of August 2025. From footwork to breathwork, athletes sweat all the details. Mazda brings the same intention to how they craft every single one of their models. You can feel the Japanese craftsmanship in every detail, from metallic accents to the available Napa leather upholstery. You make everyday drives feel like anything but, with smooth handling to intuitive controls, and with all-wheel drive standard in every crossover SUV, you can drive with confidence through almost every season, and it's all courtesy over at Mazda. Like our players, we sweat every detail, because when you can make every move count, impossible becomes irrelevant. It's all courtesy of friends over at Mazda, where I like to say, move and be moved. Today's show is also brought to you by our friends over at FanDuel. The NFL season is here, everybody, excited for it, and they want to make sure that you're ready for it with a new offer. New customers right now at FanDuel can bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets used across the app. The best part is using FanDuel, it fits however you want to bet, whether it's player props, building same-game parlays, even jumping in on live action as the game is unfolding. No matter when you want to get in on the action, it makes every game more exciting, whether you're watching your team or just keeping an eye on your fantasy lineup as well. And the kicker to it all is it's quick, easy, and the best way to add a little more energy to your Sundays on the couch. Are you ready to play? Download the FanDuel app now by visiting FanDuel.com to get started. That's FanDuel.com to place your first $5 bet and cash in on that opportunity to get $300 in bonus bets. It's all courtesy, once again, of your friends over at FanDuel. Thank you once again for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day. Another reminder for you guys, if you have not done so already, sign up for the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. Get the inside scoop on all things BYU that I've got for you guys on a pretty much a daily basis. I try and pass along tidbits as often as I get them. And the best part is it comes right to your phone in the form of a text message. You get a 14-day free trial before you're charged a single penny, and it's just $5 a month to be a part of the group. So click the link in the show notes below or reach out to us and we'll get you squared away as a member of the Locked On Cougars Insider Group. All right, before we go on today's show, let's get to our Big 12 Big Picks segment, where I make my selections for the big games this weekend. Now, I've got 8 of them, and looking back at last week, I made 7 selections last week, a little lighter slate, it felt like, for the league. But looking at it, I am off to an interesting start this year, because I started week 0, 2-1. Week 1, I went 4-4 across the 8 games I picked. And by the way, I'm not picking against the spread. For those of you who may be new to this game, I'm just a straight up money line. I'm picking winners. That's all I care about. I'm not a guy who's going to be here and like, all right, the line is 17.5. That's just not how I do it. But last week I had 7 games. I went 4-3. So overall on the season, everybody, if you're keeping track at home, I am 10-8. Last week I was right about Baylor, Oregon, Houston, and Army, and I was wrong about Kansas, ASU, and Michigan. So with that being said, now that we're 2 games over 500 for the season, let's talk about my picks for this week. Now, we're going to start off in the Big 12 Conference. We have the official, no, I guess not the unofficial, the official stateside Big 12 opener, because we did have a Farmageddon game played over in Dublin, but we have Colorado at Houston on Friday night, tomorrow night. Looking forward to this one, because Ryan Staub, the sensation coming out of the game against Delaware for Colorado, is expected to get the start, going up against Connor Wigman and the Houston Cougars. I am interested to see which of these teams impose their will most, but I am going to have a good feeling about Houston for some reason holding serve at home. It might be just the fact that they're Cougars, BYU's Cougars, but I think that Connor Wegman excuse me, what Houston's building here. They get a nice win over Colorado, and we'll see how it all shakes out. Also on Friday, we have a non-conference Big 12 matchup, and that being K-State at Arizona. Now, this is one of those series that was scheduled before Arizona joined the Big 12 conference, and because of the really tight window on the turnaround of them joining the league, they kept it as a non-conference matchup, but I am so out on K-State, and I think that Arizona, they're pretty plucky right now. So give me the Wildcats at home to beat the other Wildcats, speaking of K-State, and then do it in Tucson, but we'll see how that one plays out. Also in the Big 12 on Saturday, it's the backyard brawl. Pitt at West Virginia. This was the game that's supposed to have College game day, and then West Virginia went and yacked it up by losing to Ohio. They also lost their star running back. They lost a really good wide receiver, and Mountaineer Paul's not going to like me, but give me the Pitt Panthers to win the backyard brawl in a nail biter. I do think that Pitt gets the win. I just think that the injury bug has hit Rich Rod's squad pretty hard, and I think that Pitt wins that matchup. On to Texas State at Arizona State. Now, Arizona State, ranked 12th last week. I thought they were going to squeak it out at Mississippi State, and then they decided to, not cover anybody down the stretch. Texas State is an interesting program. G.J. Kinney is going to be one of the hottest head coaching candidates this coming cycle. He's already a pretty hot head coaching candidate in general. But I'm talking about the Power 4 level program, like let's say Oklahoma State, if that job opens up. G.J. Kinney might be on the shortest of lists to take over there. Texas State at ASU is an interesting one for me, but give me ASU to bounce back at home. I may look silly in picking that because Texas State's off to a pretty good start this year, but I do think the Arizona State, they're going to be smarting from that setback at Mississippi State, and we'll see if they can pick up a win at home. On to the national games. We got Wisconsin at number 19, Alabama. Alabama's an interesting case right now, and Wisconsin's not much better, but give me the Crimson Tide to win a really, really tight one because these are two programs I think are kind of have lost their way in a sense. The head coaches, Luke Fickell at Wisconsin, also Kalen DeBoer at Alabama, they don't just seem like they're working out to the level that everybody expected as they took over those programs, but maybe they'll get it right in time. But right now, I'm just kind of out on them. And then we got three top 25 ranked matchups. Number 6, Georgia at number 15, Tennessee. Rocky Top is going to be hopping, and give me the Volunteers to beat Georgia. I don't think Georgia is as good as everybody thinks they are right now. I think Tennessee, though, they've shown some stuff, and I think Tennessee gets the win at home. Then we've got number 18, USF, the Darling Bulls. They are headed to Miami. Now, if USF beats Miami down there on the road in South Florida, how much higher can USF fly? Remember, in 2007, that crazy season, Jim Leavitt had USF as high as number 2 in the country. Could they rise that high if they come off of a win against Miami and have 3 ranked wins to start the year? Alex Golish has done a really, really impressive job with USF, but I think the dream dies here. I think that Mario Cristobal in Miami, they will get the job done, but also at the same time, I thought that Florida would get the job done at home in the swamp, and they didn't get it. So we'll see what happens, but give me Miami to win that one. And the final pick real quick, Texas A&M at Notre Dame. 2 interesting teams. I don't really know what to make of both of them. So when in doubt, I'm going to go with an upset. Give me Texas A&M, Mike Elko and the Aggies to beat Notre Dame on the road. Maybe I'm crazy for picking that in South Bend, but I like to have an upset pick or two every single week, and that's number 16 versus number 8. So give me number 16 getting the road win over the Golden Domers. All right, so there you go, my picks. Let me know what you think in the comments below. And also, I got to get to a couple of questions before we go on today's show. Good question here from Christopher. I'm a big fan of Parker Kingston. It seemed like his head was not right last game. Is he all right physically and mentally? I think he's fine, honestly. I think that the mental aspect, it's not like he's having major mental issues. I think it's more about the fact that he just had a rough game. You put the ball on the ground, you get benched because your punt return, it gets in your head. I think he just had one of those games. You get in your own dome, and you have to find a way out of it, and it can be tough to do, and maybe you don't get out of it. I don't think he got out of it in that game, and it's unfortunate because it would have been nice to see him bounce back, but I trust that in time, he's going to earn his way back into the good graces of Cougar fans. Jake says this, with all the problems the referees had on Saturday, not just the BYU game, do you think it'd be a good idea to require referees to do post-game press conferences? I've thought about that. I don't think it's going to do anybody any justice or give us the closure that anybody needs. They screw up, they're human, and I don't think your post-game press conference is going to answer it. I think it's more about accountability, and the Big 12 has said, we talked about it yesterday, if you're in every day or talked about the Big 12 suspending a referee crew for a pretty important gaffe in that border war game between Missouri and Kansas. That I think speaks more to than just having a post-game press conference where we can lambast these guys and say, hey, how'd you screw that up? I just don't see that doing the question here. Trevor, is anywhere on Justin Kirkland? It feels like the situation Utah had with Cam Rising a couple of years ago. They said just maybe every single game. Well, Trevor, coming up after the East Carolina game, you will officially have an injury report, and we'll see what Justin Kirkland's status is on there. I have been told that Justin is working diligently to get back soon, and the hope was he'd be back in time for Big 12 play. Will that play out? TBD, but that's the intel I've got for you on that front. And the final question, off the beaten path, but Tate has a good question here. If you could only have one of these food groups for the rest of your life, which would you choose? And he mentions Chinese, Mexican, and Italian. All right, I can immediately eliminate Italian. That may offend some of you, but I'm kind of out on most Italian food. It's just not my cup of tea. For whatever reason, it's not. I am a big fan of food south of the border. I do love me some Mexican food, but I did serve my mission, my LDS mission in Taiwan, eating legitimate Taiwanese food. And I'll just put it this way. I'm recording this podcast for you guys. I will be eating at Din Tai Fung by the time some of you listen to this podcast. And I'm very much looking forward to it because it's, like Taiwanese food, Taiwanese Chinese. I will always go with Chinese. The versatility, the different flavors, all the different things you can do. Give me Chinese all day, every day, and twice on Sunday. I really do love me some Chinese food, but I like Italian just fine. Mexican's great, but nothing's going to touch Chinese for me. All right, that's going to do it for today's edition of the show. As I mentioned, no podcast tomorrow, but we will enjoy the weekend, and we'll be back on Monday, and it'll be game week once again. BYU getting ready for a cross-country trek to face off against East Carolina. Looking forward to it. As Kalani says, it's their opportunity to make their next statement, and we'll be getting you ready for it all week long next week. But enjoy your weekend. Hope you all are doing fantastic out there in Cougar Nation. And as always, thank you for making Locked On Cougars your first listen of the day, and come back on Monday and be an everydayer with us right here on the Locked On Cougars podcast.